Hello, hello, hello. How are you guys doing? There's some more stuff over here. I have to scroll up here. Hope you guys can hear me. Hope everything is working well. Hope that I'm live and everything. Every time I do a live stream, I feel like 30 seconds roughly before the live stream is supposed to start, with the way that I have the notification set up and everything like that. 30 seconds before every live stream, I feel suddenly like I forget something, like the microphone setting or my audio settings or the Discord message or popping out the chat so that I have it on a separate screen. All of those things I have to prepare in advance, and usually I stress about it for half an hour before the stream. And then because of all of that stressing, it tends to all be like okay whenever I actually need to go live. And then 30 seconds before I actually go live, I check everything again because I feel like, oh, we have some kind of issue, or I have forgotten something that I should be doing and stuff like that. I am both a fairly organized person and a very, very chaotic one at the same time, kind of deal. But I think everything is set up. I hope you guys can hear me. Hello, MindB and Not Was. How are you doing? Nice to see you both here. We have currently 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 tracks here. Before we get into that, I quickly want to go over something that was said in technical talk here, where somebody had a chart, or they had a question in regards to the low frequencies. You can go back in the Discord and read this thread if you guys want to. But they struggled with their analyzer and finding peaks in the analyzer. So here you can see they were playing a D sharp, but you can see that their reading is E minus 32.1 semitones, or cents, I think. Yeah, not semitones, cents. So Q Ramsey is actually here in the chat. That's the person that we had this conversation with. So nice to see you here. So what I want to check is just quickly with my settings of Signalizer. Hello? Why does that not open? There we are. I'm already playing a sine wave over here. Very low frequency. If you're watching on a phone or anything like that, you're not able to hear that. But this is playing the same note that they were playing. This is playing a D sharp in the sub bass register. And we can see that it's the sub bass register because it's around, let's see, from 30 hertz-ish, I would say, up until, I don't know, 60, 70 hertz is the sub bass register. And you can see that for my reading of Signalizer, it is reading D sharp plus 0.0 cents. You can see that I cannot actually show it with mouse because obviously it moves, but it's the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6th line of text here. So my settings for Signalizer are these. And I think the importance is the window size and update speed here. Let's see what happens. Yeah, so if you move the window size too low, you get unreliable readings. So with a higher window size, you should be able to track the peaks better. And you can see even with a low window size, I believe Signalizer still shouldn't have an issue with that. With very low window sizes, you can see it's not able to tell me exactly the key. But if I go with a higher window size, now you can see it's kind of moving around. And once you get high enough, it should show you a stable note here. And I'm just continuously playing that sine wave. The importance is with these analyzers is that you have to take into account the fact that these analyzers have an you can almost think of it as an update time. Meaning that it takes them a time to kind of get used to the frequency that they're trying to display. So whenever you want to test your analyzer for accurate frequency readings you just leave a sine wave playing like this, what I have here. This is M Oscillator. I believe this is a free plugin. And you can see I just have the sine wave playing the D sharp over here. And that is just continuously outputting. And of course it gets cancelled by the fact that I have the track turned off. But before that it goes in the analyzer. So that is just continuously reading what is happening in the analyzer. Hello Tesla. Hardwick official. Hi projector. Hi chat. No, long time. Hope everybody has been good. Nice to see you here as well. It has been a very long time. But nice to see you here as well. Greedo, welcome as well. So yeah, that was just a little thing about analyzers. And now let's get into the actual thing that we're going to do today, which is the feedback. As you guys all expect of me, of course. We're going to start with Marcel here. Darkenden or Private Eden. Dark Eden or Private Eden. I believe Private Eden is more their musical artist name and Dark Eden is more their gaming name, I think. I believe that's what they said a few streams ago. Have we heard any track yet? No, we have not. Mocha and Mary and Marcel, welcome. Correct me if I'm wrong, Marcel, but the artist name is Private Eden and same shit but different. I made the track in 16 bar pieces. Intro, outro and breaks are 16 bars. I think I listened. Let's see what the master says. Don't yell at me. I'm sensitive minded. I will not yell. I might say some negative things, but that is usually what happens when you ask for feedback. Because if I say positive things, it doesn't really help a lot. Private Eden. Okay. Okay. First of all, the kick and bass I think could be a bit shorter. I think you cleaned it up. One of the things that I don't like is that I already see the sidechaining in here. Usually if you want to go for a gallop pattern, which this is because the first note isn't there, you want the second note to just play. You don't even need to sidechain because your kick stops here and then the note starts here. Like, I don't think there's even a note here playing, right? Maybe there is. This seems to be like a thing going up here. Either way, if this is so low that you don't see it in the analyzer, then you don't need to play a note here and you can just have it without sidechaining since the kick isn't playing there anyway. Not really too much a fan of the snare. I don't like the boxy lower frequencies that it has. The low tonal frequencies that seem to cut into the kick over here. You can even see that on the analyzer. Overall, the higher frequencies of this track could use a bit more bite. Usually what you'll see in the spectrum is something going down and then there's a little hop here for the hi-hats. And in this case, it is kind of there, but it could be a little bit higher. It could be a little bit more like stronger. If you want a plugin for that, the free plugin that you can use is Lufticus. Set it to 40k, and then on your head group, do maybe a setting something like this over here. Mapk, welcome, welcome. Bit of a dry sound there, the vowely one. This one that's playing now. It's also maybe a bit too loud and too above stuff like the kick and bass.
Can we go back to being friends?
I feel like here the breakdown is louder than the drop. At least certain parts of it are, like certain kicks, and the snare feels particularly loud here. I like this melody thing that you have going on here with the phaser. A lot of the other sounds that you had playing melodies felt like they really didn't need melodies. Like, one of the things that I hear a lot from people that get into psytrance while they were producing other music is that they think psytrance is also like a very melodic genre when it's not. Generally speaking, most of the synths that you play are just going to be played in the root note. Like the FM synth that you had playing, for most of the time it was playing in the root note and it was just kind of doing the rhythm of it, which is fine, right? But then, like towards the end, there were a few different notes in there. And while that can be cool, sometimes it just sounds, as somebody that listens to like a lot of psytrance where that isn't the case, it can sound off. Especially if you do it with almost all of your elements, which I felt like was the case. I turned the LFO tool off and then the peak read D sharp 00. Odd. Yeah, no, that would be what I would expect. Because a volume... So, as I said, to get back to that point quickly, as I said, these analyzers, they take time to actually read what is happening here. I think if I put it on a different thing here, do you see how long it takes for it to actually move from one to the other? Like it goes down and then it goes back up here. Imagine if it's moving up and down. I mean, you don't even have to imagine that. If I temporarily turn this one off at my own LFO tool here, and then play that. And for one, what you'll see is that the sine wave is drifting with respect to Evalo, right? So the sine wave is never the same. So in this case, I do expect it to have issues with actually detecting the key. It doesn't seem too much. Maybe if we cut it off more. Yeah, you can now already see that it's not stabilizing around D sharp anymore. It is kind of moving up and down slightly. So with certain settings of Evalo, I can imagine that it doesn't stabilize enough to actually determine the exact pitch, right? If you trust the analyzer fully, you would imagine that this sine wave is actually moving up and down in pitch, because sometimes we see it read -3 cents, +5 cents, stuff like that. But if you turn it off completely, then it should stabilize. But I turned it off and on. It was on when I read D sharp. That is very strange. Okay, guys, I'll check out Lufticus, but I'm sick, so I'll go back to bed. I'm sorry to hear that. I was gonna say one final point. I don't know if you're still here, but if you are, one final point with your track was that, especially what I noticed in the breaks, is that there wasn't really a flow to the track. Like, all of the elements are there, and they sound really nice. I guess your next step in terms of upping a production for sidetrans is trying to get a flow through the track. Like, take for example, say that you have 16 bars and you have an acid line in there. You can just have an acid line play continuously, same modulation, same envelope all the time playing, or you can have it over those 16 bars slowly build up the frequency. The second option has a flow to it, in that it is increasing the energy level of the element because it goes more and more into the higher frequencies with the resonance of the acid sound. And therefore it is rising in energy. Higher frequencies means higher energy. That is also why you will see in the first drop of your sidetrans track, the very first 16 bars of the drop, usually you just have kick and bass playing, and then in the second 16 bars maybe you'll add the snare, and maybe you'll add some of the closed hats, and then in the third segment of the drop, the third 16 bars, what you'll find is that you have all of your drums playing. All of the closed hats, that offbeat open hat, and then the snare are playing. And therefore, those have the most high frequencies and also the highest energy. That is kind of like a macro flow throughout the whole track, right? That goes throughout the whole drop through multiple sections. And then within those sections, you'll have individual elements that maybe play for 16 bars, and that just help within the individual elements to kind of on a micro level, kind of on just like an individual segment level, determine the flow of the track. In your particular case, it felt like there wasn't really any element changing the energy over time. And especially in the breaks, I noticed that. It kind of went like, okay, the drop played, the drop stopped playing, and then we went into a break, which had some different drums in it, but it wasn't really, for example, building up to anything. The break, when it happened, it didn't feel like the energy kind of lowered out of the drop into the break. It just kind of was like, okay, here's the drop, and then the break comes, boom. Okay, we're now at a different energy level because it's the break. So, Marcel, for you, the next step, if you're no longer here and you're watching this back, for example, is to look at flowing throughout the track. Let me quickly scroll down to see if there's no patrons. For those that don't know, if you're a patron, you'll get early, or you get to skip the queue for feedback. But we don't have any patrons, so we're going to listen to Rise from the Ashes featuring Aurora Compositions, 3-Body Problem. I cannot even read the whole title here. 3-Body Problem / Interstellar inspired track. Okay. Hey, it's Sasa again, Sasha. It's also my first collab with a dear friend from Canada. I use some unusual methods like pitching down piano stems, chopping them up, adding some special wobbly effects on them. They usually use these techniques in electronic music, but this is more like an epic orchestral trailerish track. Very interesting. So I would say it's a hybrid. Tell me what you think and don't hold back. The video was edited by me and the B-roll on the site are generated with AI. I think I can play it like this. I am not really that interested in the video because of course I have analyzers and stuff like that. But I'll have it off to the side just for me so that I can look at it. It is very interesting, so if you guys want to take a look at the video site, then it's available on the Discord. Some very stereo elements already in this track. I think for these kind of trailer tracks, mono compatibility doesn't really matter. But for example, these high strings are going to be noticeably quieter on phones. Because phone speakers usually are in mono. Mix-wise, I would say the track is a bit muddy. It feels maybe a little bit overly reverberated. And the main element, the main melody of the track isn't really coming through. I feel like I'm mainly listening to the backing elements, like the big brass tabs, stuff like that. Unless you want your trailer to be played on phone speakers. Exactly, yeah. Mono compatibility doesn't matter as much as it would do for, say, a Sidetrans track. In fact, I think big stereo effects would work really well in something like a cinema, which is most likely where a lot of people will hear this kind of music. Because if you go to the movies, right, there's often 20 trailers before the movie actually starts. Cool stuff. I like it. As I said, it has a few issues. I think the main one is the mix. I think the main thing that you should be addressing is the mix, both mud-wise and priority of elements. Like, the musical idea, the main melody of the track, to say it like that, should be coming out of the mix a lot more. It feels like I'm mainly listening to the backing elements of the musical idea. It almost sounded like at some points where the track became really big, like you forgot to add the main melody. That is how far back it's set in the mix. Which in my opinion is probably not the best of ideas. But overall though, I really like it. Next up we have Kate over here. I'm not sure if I'm mispronouncing that. Kate Nolan. But if I am, I'm sorry, that's what I'm known for. Not finished yet, but this is what I've got so far, and some advice would be handy. Lacking some elements. It's also pre-master, of course, because it's still in production. But either way, let's have a listen here. This is either going to be Captain Hook style Psy or like a tech house thing. I'm leaning more... I don't know, it's like in between. I think this has very strong Captain Hook vibes, but with a stronger lower harmonics, I would say. It feels weightier, which I like. Kick and bass looks clean, looks very nice. I do think the kick could be a bit louder. Joined just at the right time. Nice. Not really a fan of the snare roll that doesn't open up in frequency. To me, a snare roll like that sounds better if you either open it in frequency or increase it in volume, or both. That is usually what I like to do on these kind of snare rolls. And it felt like you kind of forgot that part. The movement to the snare roll. I like the detail in the percussion work. Sounds very nice. Overall, the high end seems well balanced. I think there's a plucky ARP. Wait, there's like two ARPs. One is playing almost only in the right ear and another one is playing almost only in the left ear. I don't think I like that for like a main melody type sound. Because now the right ear is opening up and it sounds out of balance almost. Yeah, there's a noise riser that plays just in the left ear. Generally speaking, in electronic music, we don't pan a lot in mixing. And the reason for that is, in normal mixing, panning is used to... how should you say it? The main idea of panning is not just the separation, but also emulating the idea that the band is kind of playing around the listener, in the sense that if you're standing in front of a stage, one of the guitarists is probably to the left, you probably have your lead main guitar in the middle, together, which is usually also the singer, and then you have the bass guy off to the left, or to the other side, I guess. Did I say left? before. It doesn't really matter. Even in something like the drum set, what you'll find is that some of the toms are more towards the left of the drum set and some of the stuff is more towards the right of the drum set. You have like a left crash and a right crash. You have a left and right kick drum. Stuff like that is usually what you're trying to emulate with panning. Right? When you're trying to mix with panning. In electronic music, there is, how do they call it when there isn't that skeuomorphism. Skeuomorphism is the idea of designing something based on reality. So if you have a knob in an interface, skeuomorphism would be something like this. If I go into my delay, we've Echo Boy Jr. We have like actual screws in here and actual knobs that you would find on a physical device. This is skeuomorphism. And that is also what you use in mixing when you're using panning. You want to create that realistic idea of players and different parts of, for example, a drum set being actually placed in a physical space. That is also why oftentimes you give all of your instruments the same reverb, so that they sound like they're all recorded in the same space. And in electronic music, there is no link to reality. Not like we have with, for example, a guitarist playing a guitar. Because a guitarist playing a guitar is always standing in a room relative to the listener. Whereas electronic music, a kick drum is not... an electronic music kick drum is not an instrument that anybody plays in the room with you. Right? So you don't have that skeuomorphic effect of, oh, it needs to be panned somewhere. And the same is true with the riser that was panned all the way to the left, and you're having two lead lines, one pan to the left, one pan to the right. The issue that you have with that is that with all of the automations and all of the flow parts that you have going on, at one point where it really started to become an issue, for me at least, is when the main melody in the right ear was kind of opening up in frequency, and the one in the left ear felt like it was closing down. You get this disbalance with the whole track sounding like it's getting pulled to the right. Sideshow. Is this sideshow? I couldn't really nail the BPM. I feel like Captain Hook stuff is a little bit faster, so maybe it is more sideshow. I do really like the track though. The very first thing I would do when going back into this mix is reevaluating the panning, and then what you'll probably find is that in some points you have too little space for some of the elements that you're trying to put in it, especially when you have two lead lines playing on top of each other. So maybe that is something to address. Okay, I have 4 more messages, so let me check if there's no patrons in here. Doesn't seem like it. Okay. Then the next track is Metronome of Your Life. A few tweaks after. I hope it got better since last stream. To be honest, I don't remember the track. I tend to not remember a lot of tracks from earlier streams. Maybe if I play it. So we'll have to see. Either way, this is Mocha.wave, also known as just Mocha on SoundCloud, with Metronome of Your Life version 2. Nice chords. Here I think we have the same kind of issue that we had in the last track. Your offbeat hat is hard pan to the left. Oh yeah, I do remember this track. Now that I hear the vocals, I remember this, yeah. It's almost like the track listened to my actual feedback and now the offbeat head is no longer panned to the left. Vocal could use a little bit of extra reverb delay, a little bit of extra ambience. There is some delay and reverb already in there. As I think the delay will be okay. Now that it's playing on its own, the vocal is a little bit clearer, of course. But reverb, it could have a little bit more. Still. Nice sound. I like the clarity in the mix here in this section. One thing that I would recommend is checking out resampling for this stuff. I feel like you are bleeding into some of the areas over here. Maybe not in your kick drum, maybe even in your kick drum because you have like a big spike over here. I don't think with this genre it really matters as much as it does with psytrance. Like psytrance is really, you want to have every transient have the maximum amount of punch because you're trying to get people into that trance through the dancing. I don't think that that's that necessary in this genre, so maybe it's not even needed. But it could maybe clean up the lower frequencies a little bit more. It could clean up the transients of these sounds over here a little bit more. So it could be nice. Thank you very much for the feedback, bro. It's much appreciated. You're welcome. How do we make donk kind of sounds? FM synthesis, yeah. I was about to say, it's either like triangle waves or sine waves, and you probably want your modulator to be an octave higher than your carrier, if I remember correctly. One of the tricks that you could try with this vocal is make 2 return tracks at different reverbs on both of them, fully wet, and then hard pan those reverbs left and right, so you get like more reverb out of it, but it's getting pushed very far to the side because the reverb in the left and the right channel will be different, and therefore the waveform will be different, giving you a stereo effect, right? Jonas, welcome. How are you doing? Sorry, Mary, welcome as well. I think I didn't say hi yet. Suddenly the vocal becomes a lot drier than it has ever been. Maybe a bit of a strange effect here. I kind of like the almost distorted sound that you're getting at this point here again. think I missed something on the missing in this part where the metronome vocal gets dry. Yeah, that just it sounded a little bit off because it has been playing with this distorted texture to it for such a long time that you kind of get used to it. Like, okay, that's what this vocal is, and then suddenly that cuts out all the way, and therefore it just feels off. And personally, I would keep the almost distorted. It felt like there was like some very fast panning involved or something like that. So that is something that, or that is what I would do. Have it always stay with that distortion on there. Overall though, very nice track. I really like it. Sounds very cool. Next up we have Darkadelic. Interesting name here. By Virtual Instinct, who I have not seen in the chat yet, I think. Not yet. Maybe they join later. There is in fact a really fast panning. Nice, nice. Goes to show that I do have a little bit of experience with this music production thing, eh? Okay, Darkadelic 155 BPM master by Virtual Instinct. Let's hope that Virtual Instinct has finally listened a little bit to me and has slowed down with the amount of sounds that he uses in certain parts of the track. Sounds like there's a little bit of noise on top of the kick, which is interesting. It's not wrong, but interesting. Kick seems fairly loud for the bass. Like the bass could have 2-3 more dB, I think. From a structural point, this is already a lot better in terms of just the amount of elements that are in a certain spot. At this point I would have liked a snare or a clap as well, just to enhance the groove a little bit. The only me, or is the voice and the image are delayed? Maybe. I did try to fix something. I'll talk about that maybe a little bit. There's not a lot of stereo interest in the track here. Like the bassline feels fairly mono, it could have a little bit more stereo interest, but also stuff like the snare could have like a reverb layer on top of it. The hats could have a bit more of a space to it as well. And a lot of the sound design feels like it's very mono. Like you have this sweep up here, which sounds nice in terms of the stereo, but a lot of the other sounds sound almost too mono. Like this one over here, the little thing that just played there. This thing here as well. That sound is a little bit on the loud side. You also have a few sounds that don't delay out, which feels very strange because, for example, in the breakdown it was like the whole sound or the whole breakdown was made of an atmosphere that is just morphing synths, and then suddenly there's one synth that kind of comes in and just suddenly stops, right, as opposed to being part of that morphing effect. And I feel like the morphing effect is what you're going for with a lot of the trans-gated sounds and a lot of the just the short 16-note sound and kind of the way that they're layered on top of the main atmospheres of the track. So for the trans-gated sounds that are part of that almost one atmosphere, make sure that they all have at least some delay, that they're fading out. Virtual Instinct, welcome, welcome. You are indeed just in time to hear the last half of the feedback on the track. Overall, I would say it's a big improvement, structurally wise, from some of the music that I can remember from you. I remember your the works that you used to submit were always too busy, and now I think you're closer to the balance of where you actually want to be. Still very mono here. This is what your track should look like. This is a synth that is good stereo, the one that just played here. But here you can see how mono it is when you have either just a completely mono synth playing. Yeah, this is what you want your track to look like, not a flat line. Overall, very cool sound. I do quickly want to check what Mind B said, so I'm just going to talk a little bit so that gets picked up on the stream. The reason why why it might be that it seems like the camera and my audio are out of sync is because they literally are. I have my microphone now with 183 milliseconds of delay, which is exactly 11 frames. Or not exactly, because 11 frames is 183.33333 ad infinitum. But this is the closest I could get to exactly 11 frames of delay on the microphone. And the reason why that is the case is because I noticed every time when editing lately, I had to take my microphone and move it back by 11 frames exactly in order for it to match with what I was actually saying visually. So it looks like, or it's this is to basically fix the microphone in the editing part. At least that is what should happen, hopefully. I'm still testing with it. I don't know if this should be a plus or a minus, the way that I should read this, the way that they go forward and backward, because every software reads that differently. I know for a fact that in Ableton, if you want to go more left with your delay, right, if you go into sample delay over here, you want to go into the minus. This moves it more to the left by whatever milliseconds or samples that you set over here for whatever track that you have. After restarting my PC, it's not delayed anymore. I will check once I get into a break in about half an hour-ish. I will check if I can see if there is a delay in there. For that reason, I'm quickly going to sit here and talk a little bit in full cam with accentuated mouth movements so that I can actually see that. And maybe you guys can also say if that is the case, if it's out of sync this way. Few claps also seem to often help with this. Yeah, I'll use that. In the break, I'll quickly test if that is actually the case. I'm like 51 minutes in when this happens, so I can remember that. Anyway, I'll continue listening to some music, and the next track that we're going to listen to is by Mind B. It's in sync. Nice. Okay. Nice. Yeah, I'll double check that, but nice to get some confirmation. welcome to the stream, Dada. Nice to see you. The new track, or the track that we're listening to, is a new track. I don't think I even heard this as part of the stuff that we sent back and forth in the label. Maybe parts of it. Let's see. Either way, this is Mind B with a new track, Work in Progress. It was from my side. Okay, cool. Maybe the kick and bass coming in volume would be nice. Nice and clean. I like it, although the first bass note could be a bit quieter. Or you could. In this case, I think you still have the sub in here. For the first note, you could remove the sub, which is something that I often do in my patches because it gives you more space. And it just allows the sub of the kick to basically sit there freely. I think I've heard this before, this part. Oh yeah, I've heard this. I remember that one shot. I really like that one shot. That sounds really cool. Overall, I think the track right now as it stands is a little bit too squashed, mastering wise. So I think when it comes to the mastering of this track, maybe lower the input gain to your final limiter by maybe a dB or something like that. dB and a half, maybe. Yeah, why not remove the sub? Yeah, you can remove the sub. That is definitely an option. Depends on a little bit the kind of groove that you want to go for. If you want to have, if you want to maintain the click more, then you remove the sub. If you don't really care about the click, or even if you want more of a galloping groove, you could lower the note as well. Oh yeah, I've done a 30-second master. Yeah, it's just a little bit on the loud side. The overall composition and that kind of stuff is just perfect. Nice little variation there. Very cool. Very, very nice. To be honest, I'm super happy that when Subject Ultra and I first came up with the idea of starting Eclipse, one of the very first things I said is, oh, we should get Mind B on board. Because that was right after I did my collaboration with him, the first one. I should be back hopefully now. I just had a little connection drop there. What I was saying was, when Subject Ultra and I first came up with the idea of starting the label thing and starting up Eclipse, which is almost a year ago now, one of the very first things that I said was like, we should get Mind B on board, because that was right after we had worked on our collab together what's it called again? Extraterrestrial Explorers. Sorry. Extraterrestrial Explorers, the track that Mind B and I have made together, and that has released. We have since made another track together that hasn't released yet, which I might play later. But one of the very first things that I said when the idea for the label came about is we should get Mind B on board, and I'm so happy that we did, because ever since then it's just like every track is just going up and up and up. And the cool thing about Mind B is that he has a very, very unique sound. In every Mind B track I feel, or that I've heard, I feel like there's that one moment where, you know, the melody comes in and he's doing a lot of the modulation stuff, and he's paying a lot of attention to all of the details, and that is really paying off in your music, is those big melodies that every once in a while in every segment kind of just stand out from the track. And this track is no different. That melody that comes in over here is just really nice. Like, this immediately screams Mind B track to me. Do you know what I mean? And there's very few artists that I know like this, that have that for every single track. I know a few artists that have a unique sound that you can hear in a couple of tracks. But I feel like Mind B has that in every track that he works on, which is very challenging, very challenging. Anyway, I'll quickly check if there's any patrons in here. Doesn't seem like it. And then we are here, Q Ramsey, with no melody. Okay. No vocal, no melody, I think, is what they mean. Okay. And this was a track that we talked about before, of having issues with the bass, for the people that saw this conversation here that I mentioned before on the stream. So this is the track that I think sparked that conversation. Subwise, I don't really hear an issue with any of this. What I would do for the bass line is turn it into a re-space by giving it 2 voices of unison and a little bit of detune. You should probably separate the sub bass if you're doing that. I don't know if I'm a fan of the random parts of noise there. Also, the guitar seems to be very far in the background. Like right now, that riser is louder than the guitar. I feel like the guitar should be one of the main elements of this part, right? Not really a fan of the snare here. I would personally probably go for a clap. And if you want to go for a snare, choose an electronic one and not an acoustic one. And also, it is probably best, just like with psytrance, to remove all of this lower stuff that you can see over here that is part of the snare. You can see it sometimes cancelling parts of the kick and sometimes enhancing parts of the kick. You don't really need your snare to be strong over here in electronic music, because you just want kind of the noise component of that snare. Bit much on the subs, yes. As I said, the guitar could be a little bit louder. I think even here the acid line could be a little bit louder. Of course, if you have the acid line, then probably don't play the guitar and use alternating ideas here, right? So that the guitar isn't playing the whole way through. I overall maybe even agree to just lower the sub itself. I think that was something that I said, maybe? Or was that in a different discussion? That may have been a different discussion. Somebody else asking about what to do if they have too much sub. But I think you do have a little bit too much sub here. And I think part of the issue was... that, as he said in the technical talk, he had issues hearing the sub. Because he has a speaker that goes up to 44 Hz and he was playing in D sharp, which is lower than that. That is around 35, 34 Hz, I think. I said it somewhere, but... I don't remember where I said it. I did mention the frequency somewhere in here. Yeah. C sharp is roughly 35, so it should be above 35 Hz, but he is, his range is up until 44 Hz, like he says over here, for his speakers, so he doesn't actually hear the sub, and that is, adding too much sub or too little sub if you cannot actually hear the sub is a very common mistake that people make, especially if they're not as experienced with music production. Like, I feel at this point, even though I don't have a dedicated sub base right now for my monitors, something that I of course want to address once I'm in a new apartment and once I want to set up like a proper studio up there and stuff like that. But for me personally, I can get my sub base where it needs to be within like a margin of error, even if I'm not completely able to hear them. That being said, for somebody that doesn't have over a decade of experience, I can imagine that it's much harder. Hello Zen Lion, welcome to the stream. Sorry that I didn't see your message before. Right now we were right here, so there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 tracks before, or in total, now submitted. I feel that was working with monitors, no low end. It's a nightmare, endless tweaking. Yeah, exactly. I have been working with those speakers that I had before the monitors with for over a decade. And they came with a sub, but I always had the sub like out to the side. Because I hate when there's stuff in front of my feet when I'm sitting at my PC. I want to be able to like extend my feet. So the sub was never placed in a spot that actually makes sense for the sub. So it was always off to the side, which is not exactly what you want. So even with those speakers, I didn't necessarily have like a good monitoring system for lower frequencies. But after 12 years of work, or I think, 12 years, almost exactly 12 years of working with that, I started producing in May or something like that, and I got my monitors 12 years later in January, February. So almost exactly 12 years of working with those crappy speakers has taught me a lot about how to get your low end right without actually hearing your low end. And of course, part of that is the analyzers. One of the things that you probably saw was that some of the frequencies went like this, and the sub bass was like higher up here. Usually, that is a telltale sign of having too much sub. If you have like a very steep drop off before 100 hertz, because usually with your speakers you're able to balance all of this stuff out pretty well. And then all of a sudden, if you go up or if you go down like this, it is probably going to sound off. Generally speaking, what you want like a nice steady decline over time. That is the most general rule of thumb, often referred to as pink noise mixing, I think, which is where per octave you go down 4.5 dB, right? 4.5 or 3, I think maybe 3 dB. Yeah, pink noise is 3 dB, brown noise is 6 dB. So with pink noise mixing, what you essentially are looking for every octave that you go up the spectrum is that you lower it by 3 dB. Now for something like psytrance or techno or the music that this was, so like rave music, what you'll find is that the sub is a little bit more exaggerated, has a little bit more than that, but not a lot. And the second thing is that instead of continuously going down, what you'll find is that around the 10K area, there's that little bump from mainly the offbeat hi-hat, but in general, all of the top drums. So, those are the difference between like traditional pink noise mixing and the way that you would mix a psytrance track. What you'll often also find in psytrance is that there's a little bit of an extra scoop, I think, at around 500, 400 hertz. At least personally, that is something that I really like. Dude, your psytrance must be getting insanely good. I mean, just look at your beard. Yeah, this is an indication of my skill at producing, indeed. And that is the main reason why I'm growing out my beard. No, I just want to test what happens if I grow it out. It doesn't look great. Now I'm in the stage where I'm like, this is all fuzzy and it jumps up like this, especially if I do this, of course. Now that I'm wearing headphones, you don't even see the biggest issue with it. But I put some oil in it to kind of smooth it down a little bit and have it all point downwards. But at some point, I hope that I get a beard long enough that I can just tie it all together and do what I used to have on the top of my head, but just down here. I'm kind of missing my old hairstyle, so I'm trying to replace that with a new hairstyle, but just in a different spot. It could have been worse. I could have tried to braid my pubic hair instead of my beard. Anyway, let's have a listen here to Darren 4 Ike, also known as Endless Experience, with Forgotten Dreams 2. I assume this is also a track that we've heard before. I believe I remember the title. I like it. Maybe in the intro those pads could have a little bit more movement. Filter cutoff slowly opening up and closing a little bit would be nice. We had a little issue there. When there were multiple kicks, they were bleeding into each other. One, this track is lacking a little bit in terms of the fills. It is just like one long drop until we go into the break. Another thing is, it's not like wrong to do it this way, but it does get boring very quickly. What you have done is you started off with a melody, which is the 3 plucks, right? And then you went for using the same synth and just adding more notes to it over time. That gets a little bit boring over time because the sound doesn't really change. What I would suggest is either using multiple sounds or just using multiple ideas all together. Yeah, here the pluck is already coming back. I was going to say like 8 bars after the start of this drop, the pluck is coming back. Luckily here we have a cool new idea. I would say this is maybe a little bit on the loud side, this new synth here. It also feels like it's still going up in volume. Here it's a very similar sound to a sound that we already had, and it's playing the exact same, or not the exact same, but like, or maybe even the exact same melody, but at least very similar melody to the pluck that we heard before. So even though this synth is new, it's basically just a combination of 2 earlier elements. I know that often we're trying to strive for a track that has a very unified theme, but you can't overdo that. Looks very Viking. That is indeed the vibe that I'm going for, yes. Of course, if this is the outro, you want to have that probably fade out at some point or something like that. Overall, some cool ideas. It just gets a little bit boring because I feel like you're trying to be a little bit too cohesive with some of the elements in the track. There's never a moment where you're saying like, oh, wow, something new is happening here. It may feel a little bit too just like one thing over 5 minutes, right? Because this was a 5-minute track. Overall though, sounds very nice. hopefully you can maybe add a few elements and make it a little bit more interesting, and then it should be okay. Next up, we have TSLA, Between Stars here. Still in the mixing phase, hope I can get some feedback on that. I'll try my best. And then this will probably be the last track before my little break. Very wide sounds here. The sitar is probably way too wide, because that is more of a main element, so you probably want it more mono than the pad that sits below it. I think it may also even have like some moving panning or something like that. The bass seems to close in a bit of a strange way. You have 3 oscillations that are almost at the same frequency, and then they lower over here. I would love to have a little bit more of a click at the beginning and it tapering down a little bit faster, so that these 2 oscillations maybe go up until this point here, and then it kind of fades up until here. As opposed to, it seems like the modulation that you have is like this, and then it goes down. It's a little bit of a strange sound, I would say. A little bit on the loud side, that particular synth there. I like this sound here with the vowel on there.
This morning I want to talk about space in relation to what is ordinarily called reincarnation, because this is one of the most fascinating applications of the sense that space constitutes something significant.
If we're gonna have a kick and bass that sounds, it sounded like the drop already started there for a second, and then it started to slowly high pass. What I would suggest is either starting a little bit higher, so that it's very clear to the listener, like, hey, wait, this is just the kick and bass coming in the break and not the drop yet, or lowering the volume more, so that it's like very low. And even then, if you're lowering the volume, I would probably also low pass it at that point, so that there's like a clear indication of like, this is not yet the part that is supposed to be the drop. Here we have some very cool sound design going on. Before I almost wanted to say it like some of the sound design is again sounding a little bit too similar, but the synth like this is really nice. Here you definitely have something that is standing out, is different.
Between stars, there is darkness. There is obviously some sort of analogy, which I've already drawn your attention to, between space and
If you have the plugin, for vocals especially, it is very cool to have Echo Boy Jr. because it comes with a wide delay. So the vocal can be mono and then the delay of it will still sound not like a ping pong delay going left and right, but it will be like a very wide version of the delay. There's other ways that you can achieve that. For example, you can have just a wet version of your delay and then stereonize it with something like wider 2 or M stereo spread if you have that. Another way is that you could even polarity flip one of the 2 channels of the delay so that you get a delay that is like fully wide. In that case, keep in mind that the delay is going to fully cancel in mono. So that might not be exactly what you're after, because then if your track would be playing on a festival, it wouldn't have any delay on the vocal. Therefore, something like the wide version in Echo Boy Jr. is a better option, because I do believe that there's at least some mono compatibility in it, but it does make very wide sounds, which I really like. The Stereo Maker is a great plugin for mono compatible stereo. Yeah, something like that could also work. Overall, I feel like the track could use a little bit less of around 400 Hz. That dip that I talked about before, I feel like this track is maybe a little bit too energetic there. So I would probably try to fix that on the kick and bass, just an EQ. Go like fairly wide band, so fairly low Q, and then around 500, 400 Hz, just dip down like this. Of course, you guys cannot hear exactly what is happening because we're not actually listening to this. This is just so that the analyzers get to see it. But overall, great track and great sound. Had to be away, went back and listened to the feedback. Everything felt background because there needs to be room for vocal / melody. I just removed them for your copyright convenience. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. The balance would be off in the track if there's elements missing. Yeah, that makes sense. Then to be honest, anything related to the mixing, then what I'm saying doesn't really make sense. Maybe except the part about this. Were you the guy with the sub? Yeah, right? Yeah. Maybe everything in regards to mixing except the part about the sub is you can probably ignore that, because it's really hard to judge a mix if 2 of the main elements are missing. It's basically impossible, right? Because the main elements is what determines the balance of the track. Anyway, we have a few more tracks in here ready for us to listen to. But I'm first going to play one of my tracks as I take a quick break, and I'll be right back. Let me just get an audio track and get some analyzers for you guys. I don't think I need this thing anymore, so I can delete that. And then I'll put on the track that I'm actually working on with Mind B. This one for you guys to hear. This is a track that has been finished production-wise for quite a while, but I need to mix that. I'm just gonna wait up until September when I've moved apartments with that, because I need to make a lot of content in advance, because I'm taking a little bit more than a week of vacation halfway through August, and then right after that I'm moving to a different apartment. So I need to basically make content in advance for like 2-3 weeks or something like that. For some reason the play had played all the way up until there. That's okay. Anyway, I'll quickly take a break when the track is finished. we'll be back, and then we'll continue listening to your guys' music.
So, let us dream big. Let us dream big. Let us dream big. Let us dream big. Digital has allowed us to do whatever the heck we want. If you want a minute, any time period, you can do it. The tools are there.
Become one with the machine.
Two seconds. I should be alright. Yes. Okay. Where in the world are you based, Projector? I am Dutch, as some people pointed out in the chat. But I do indeed live in Italy right now. I know it's very confusing. When I started the channel, I was actually living in Hungary. So I've moved all over the place. But yeah, now I live in Italy. Anyway, let's move on to the next track, which is this one over here, My Bitch by Mocha. Very interesting title. Yeah, let's have a listen. I do need to, I think, switch to other analyzers, because these are the ones that, yeah. Nowadays, with my new routing setup that I have to have analyzers on a special track if I want to play anything inside of Ableton, because my Ableton no longer goes back inside my own Ableton, which was one of the issues that I had with my previous audio setup, where sometimes I could have like feedback loops and all of that kind of stuff, which would be really annoying if I was recording something in the desktop while the track was playing or something like that. And now that is no longer the case. But that also means that if I'm playing tracks during the break of my feedback stream, I either have to play them outside of Ableton or have my own, or like different analyzers for them. It's a remix, so I keep it real. Oh, well, if it's a remix, I'm sorry to, it's nice that you say that, but I'm sorry to inform you that according to the rules, no remix, bootlegs, or edit will be played. Unless it's a remix of your own track. If it's a remix of somebody else's track, then you don't own the full copyright. And even if you own the full copyright, like if you have a license to remix, it is still hard for me to enforce that license on your behalf. Because I already get a copyright claim basically every feedback stream that I do from somebody that released a track and didn't think about what that means. But like, so I already get a lot of copyright issues. I don't want to necessarily add more to that by say playing remixes of other people's material and stuff like that. I didn't know. Yeah, that's why it says here read before posting. I know that this is hard to, or this is easy to miss. I don't think there's any way for me to, for example, have people forced to read something like this before they're able to write in a certain chat. I know there's such a thing that you can do before posting in the Discord server in general. But I would love to have that just for the feedback on stream chat. I would need to maybe contact somebody that knows a little bit more about Discord moderation than I do. But yeah, we'll have to see. So unfortunately, I have to skip your track, which means that we're continuing with Orin. Cyrus, I'm assuming that 5 is supposed to be an S, in the same way that this is supposed to be an E. Work in progress, be kind. I will. Let's have a listen. But yeah, ever since that video that I make about copyright, it has been getting better, but the last few weeks it has basically back to where it was before I made that video. I don't know if I like the vocal that low pass. Ooh. Very strong, very clean as well. I think the vocal reverb is maybe a little bit too loud. Also, you have something that goes really low in the lowest frequencies there, so that is probably something that you want to cut out. One of the problems with this vocal is I feel like we've never heard this vocal clearly. It becomes almost synth-like at this point, which is interesting. Yeah, here as well. It's coming out of such a low frequency that it goes into frequencies that you don't really need. That is going to cause issues. So you probably want to cut that around 30 Hertz or something like that. That's some good hardtack. Yeah, Orin is very good at what he does. Very powerful. Some kick rolls or some double kicks, stuff like that would be nice every once in a while. Very cool. I like that a lot. Of course, I kind of say that with every Orin track. For those that don't know Orin, I think said to me that he's been producing over 2 decades now, and it definitely shows, because this is just very well produced. There were a few issues. The main issue that this track has right now was that lower frequency up and down thing becoming too low. Don't remove it, just high pass something like that at around 30-35 hertz, and then you should be okay. Because anything below that is information that we don't really need. So just cut that out, and then it should be okay. I usually cut at 26 hertz when mastering. That's a bad idea. That's a very bad idea. You want to cut individual elements because there's negative side effects to cutting, right? What is the easiest way for me to show that? I guess it's just showing a kick and bass. So let me just quickly get a kick. This is going to take me like 30 seconds or something like that to set up a quick kick and bass. But I want to show what can happen if you just cut for the sake of cutting, for example, in a master chain. So let's say that we have a kick over here. It's not the best sounding kick, but that doesn't really matter, because it's just my template kick. This is the kick that I use as a starting point when I'm actually designing the kick drum. I'll go with a bass from the new pack that I'm currently working on. This is a full wavetable bass. So this is a bass line that technically does not need to be resampled in order for it to be clean, which is very cool. Let's get a nice low frequency like a D sharp. Okay, let's get the tone right here. Something like this, and then I'm just quickly going to get myself a size scope on here so that we can look at this. As you can see, very nice clean kick and bass. What I mean by clean is that every element, so for example the transient over here, I'll make this a bit lower in volume so that it's easier to see as well. You can see that for this transient it returns to 0 right before it. For this transient it returns to silence right before it. Here it returns to silence. That is what we mean with a kick and bass being clean, right? And in this case, the reason for that is because this is a full wavetable bass. So this bass line looks like it's like processed, even though there's no actual processing happening on there. This is purely all captured in the wavetable, which is the power of wavetable bass lines, because now I could change the MIDI around and do stuff like that without having to resample anything. That's the ultimate goal here. Whenever I talk about wavetable bass lines, I always talk about the fact that you don't need to process this. And honestly, what I would say is don't process these. Don't take these wavetables and start adding, or don't take these basses and start adding effects like something like a multi-band dynamics plugin, because you can already see that we're going to start losing some of that cleanliness. Especially if I move this down, you can see it is starting to have the transient at a point where it's not close to silence anymore. And we can start to see some bleeding into the kick drum. If I make this a little bit more extreme, maybe I'll set this to a very high steepness. You can hear it happening as well, but you can see all of the transients are getting messed up. And this is because of the way that filters work and their relationship to phase shift, which is exactly what you're seeing over here. Of course, this is now a very extreme example. But if I say, oh, I'm going to high pass my master or my kick and bass, and let's say that I just do that at what you said, 26 hertz, I believe. Let's go 26 hertz for this. And I move that before it. Let's have a look at the difference of what this does. Even though there's no frequency actually being cut away here, you can still see we have that issue, right? You can see this transient is being pushed down. This transient is being pushed up here. The kick is being pushed up. And you can see that you're going to need more dynamic range in order to actually have the signal play. So this is a negative side effect, and if there's nothing there, you're not really removing anything important. So it doesn't serve a purpose, and it does do damage to your track. So just cutting your master at an arbitrary frequency is going to do a lot more good than it does bad, because all of the issues that you're going to encounter are issues that you can probably get away with in mixing. Like if there's a sound like we had before, where there's just this one sound that goes down to a frequency that you don't need it to be, just cut it on that sound, so that it doesn't affect all of the other sounds that don't need that high pass frequency. This kick and bass is designed in with like wavetables and such, so I know for a fact there's not going to be lower frequencies below this. Right, I can see that there's no very slow oscillation happening here. I can see that there's no DC offset happening over here. So there's really no reason to high pass this. There's no material that you're going to get rid of when high passing, but you are going to do damage. So keep that in mind, Q Ramsey. Don't just cut a certain frequency in your master chain. That is a very bad idea. Either if you do it before... Wait, what's happening here? All my analyzers are tripping out. I need to do this, I think. Now it should be okay. Yeah. Don't just high pass your master. That's a very bad idea, because all of the problems that you're trying to resolve are much easier to resolve in the mix. There's two ways of cutting frequencies in the master. If you do it before your final limiter is probably going to have to work harder, because with that phase shift, you're going to see that the transients are going to be louder, and therefore it needs to squash those transients more, and you're going to get maybe more distortion if your limiter is starting to distort. And even if it doesn't start to distort, you're going to have more of a pumping effect happening there. And if you do it after the final limiter, it's even worse, because then you think that you're limiting, but then the high pass is phase shifting it again, and therefore you're actually going to clip even though you have a limiter on there, just because of what the high pass itself is doing. Usually have been the first thing on the list. Yeah, it's a bad idea. You're probably better off tackling those issues. The issues that you're trying to solve with the high pass, you're probably better tackling that in the mixing stage. Just home in on the specific element that is causing you the problem. When it comes to kick and bass, I never high pass those. I think phase alignment and maintaining the phase shift that I have when I'm designing the kick and bass is much more important than removing frequencies that I know aren't there. So for that reason, I never high pass my kick and bass. Of course, apart from the high pass transitions, which I take into account when I'm designing my kick and bass. Do I still have it? Yes. Like my final chain is going to look somewhat like this. The fun thing about the plugin Simplon is that its lowest frequency that it can go with its high pass is 4 Hz, 5 Hz, right? 4.812, which means that the frequency is so low that the phase shift is going to be minimal. Right, this is not to the point where it's causing issues. You can see it is slightly away here, but this transient is still going to have impact. This transient is still going to have impact. You can see it's like a very small difference. Of course, if I start turning it up, we're going to get more and more of a difference. But that doesn't really matter, because I usually do this in transitions anyway. For elements outside of the kick and bass, I almost always high pass a lot of my synths, because purely with the sound design that we do for psytrance, we tend to have a lot of unwanted frequencies, both in the lower frequencies as well as in the higher frequencies. So both low passes and high passes are used to make space for the kick and bass and the drums in the top frequencies with low passes and high passes. the other thing that I would say in regards to that is those high passes are always at around like 100 hertz at least, maybe even a little bit higher, because those high passes they have a different function than just removing the sub bass rumble, like lower than the sub bass material, to call it that. They are there as space makers for the sub bass and even the first, sometimes even the second harmonic of the bass line. So it's like a different philosophy with the high passes, but I'm targeting specific elements as opposed to just putting a high pass on the master, because I think that does more damage than it does good. I might now need to go into this stream for conversations with projector, because that may be a rant that could actually be useful for people on the conversations with projector channel. Anyway, we have one more submission. Let me quickly check. That's not a patron, so we're just going to continue here with Digital Nerve, Bas Busa by Pico. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I'm probably not, but that's what I'm known for. Anyway, this is Bass Busa. Some interesting rhythm polymeter here.
Somehow, part of the package of being a living, thinking being is that you get a universe inside of you. You know, you get a galaxy-sized object inside you that you can access. And there are...
I don't like that the vocal cuts off halfway through the sentence. I'm also not a fan of the pluck being so loud, that arp being so loud, that kind of covers up the vocal. Kick and bass is looking very nice, looking very clean as well. Nice phase alignment here. I don't think I'm a fan of the sound here kind of coming in later. I did like the next pattern that you played with it though. Here it's better because there's like a short sound and then it goes into the stab. Thanks for the feedback, dude. I'll try to amend the issues. You're welcome. Glad I could help. Some very loud sounds there. Here we have a different bass line. In this case, there's a little bit of bleeding coming from the kick drum. I think maybe your kick drum is a little bit on the long side. Like you can see that this transient is getting pushed up here. This stuff is still getting pushed up and then it kind of lowers. You can see the difference between this bass and this bass, right? There's a few sounds in this track that are completely mono, like this stab over here is either completely mono or almost completely mono. In this case, you also have a sound that is way too stereo here. So the stereo field of this mix definitely has some issues.
Somehow, part of the package of being a living, thinking being is that you get a universe inside. You know, you get a galaxy-sized object inside you that you can access. And there are the mountains, the rivers, the jungle, dynastic families, the roots.
I hear like some glitching up stuff. for the vocal, which is cool. But there is a bigger issue with this vocal though, and that is that it's mixed in a way that you cannot actually hear what he's saying. So he starts to tell a story, you get into the story, and then everything else overpowers the vocal. That's a very bad idea. Nice kick and bass again. I like the groove that you're going for here. I like the detail that this bass has. You do seem to have like 1 or 2 notes where the sub is a little bit louder than the rest, like that one over there. There's certain notes that suddenly kind of shoot out with this one over here. I also think this step may be a little bit too loud. Like personally, I would like to hear the drums a little bit more, for example, and the stab maybe a little bit less, especially now that it's so high frequency and full sounding.
And there are the mountains, the rivers, the jungles, the dynastic families, the ruins, the planets, the works of art. The mountains, the rivers, the jungles, the dynastic families, the ruins, the planets, the works of art, the poetry, somehow part of the package.
Here the vocals already have a lot more space to just sit in, so this is definitely a better place for them to be. I do also feel like the track could be a little bit longer, because if this is like the final arrangement of this track, what you're going to end up having is the segment that the DJ is going to mix out from is the segment where the vocals sit. So what I would probably do is at least like add a 16-bar outro, or even take this track and just make it a little bit longer. Right now you're at like 6 minutes-ish. Can I still see that? Yeah, 6 minutes and 16. You can turn that up maybe to 7, 8, maybe even 8 minutes. If you want to go for something like a Captain Hook style arrangement, you could even go to like 11, 12 minutes if you wanted to. And that means that you should have more, you have more space if you potentially want to just make it so that the vocal is earlier on in the track and not in the part where the DJ would potentially mix out from. I had some issues with velocity on bass. Yeah, it's just one bass note that felt like a little bit more weighty than the rest. I don't know if you're doing some really strange stuff. I did notice myself a lot when I'm doing bass melodies that I often have to do something like this. Right, let's say that I'm working on a bass with octave jumps in it. What I find myself doing a lot is something like this, where for higher notes, if I'm playing a high note, then the volume is going up over here, and then if I'm playing a lower note, the volume is going down. I guess like a melody would be something like this. You can see it's lowering slightly in volume when I'm doing that. Now you can also see the power of the wavetail bass. I don't have to do any resampling, and you can see the cleanliness that we're getting out of this bass line. Right? It's always leaving space for the transient. It always has the same shape. Even if I play an octave higher, it just doubles the cycle because it's still all in synthesis. So it's always going to have the same envelope, independent on the note height that I play, or the pitch of the note that I play. So that is again really powerful about wavetail bass lines, and I often find myself having to do something like this. In this case, I might even go a little bit lower on the modulation. This feels more balanced to me, and you can see that the waveform kind of squashes down every time it goes to a higher pitch. So if you're doing something like that, I can imagine that you're having some issues getting that balance to sit exactly the way that you want it to and to sit exactly right. Of course, you could also do that with velocity in here. My basses are velocity sensitive for at least the last 2-3 packs that I have worked on. So that is volume 2 and volume 3 of Psychedelic Essentials and volume 1 of Psychedelic or Psytrance Vitals for Vital. Volume 4 of Psychedelic Essentials for Serum is being worked on right now. That is where this patch is actually coming from. And that is also going to have velocity sensitive basses for everything, right? For all of the basses are going to be velocity sensitive, and all of them are going to be in this format of wavetable bass that you just put in the track and don't worry about anymore. Open this up again, and then we'll move on to the next track. Again, we have one more message, so I'll quickly have to check. No, that's not a patron. So that means that we move on to Kate Nolan again with trust issues. Is it trust issues specifically with trusting the guy pictured here, or just in general? Sorry. Projector president of USA instead of Biden. I hope not. I don't want to get shot. I like having both of my ears intact. It allows me to do the stuff that I do inside of music. Thanks for your feedback. You're welcome. Glad to help. Nice clean kick and bass. I like it. Snare slash clap sounds fairly mono. A little bit of stereo width on that would be nice. I also think my stereo analyzer is passing out. Yeah. This is the actual stereo width here. Does that also mean that this one has the same issue? I don't think so, no. Sometimes it does. Don't mind the goofy photo. I'm sorry. Especially not the ear. Yeah, ears for somebody in my position as a musician are very, very important. So I would like to keep them. Overall, nice groove, nice vibes. With these like very empty segments, I always like to have a little bit of a sustained pad that is just playing like sustained throughout the whole thing. Because I can hear that you have like a sidechain pad in there. But that means that some areas just feel very, very empty. To be honest, even in the drops, that seems to be the style that you're going for, right? Like the empty, detailed sounds playing one after the other and having a lot of space in between. So maybe disregard that last comment. There's again what you're saying, like some panning happening left and right with some of the main elements, which does sound a little bit strange. If you have elements that kind of are same in tonality, like the FM synths that were just played or the wobbly things that just played, and it's panning a little bit left and right, that is okay. But for example, here you have that particle sound element that plays on the left side. And that feels unbalanced. Here it pans from left to right, which is already better. But if you have it pan left and right a few times, that is okay. Like there's no issue there. That is just an attention to detail in terms of interesting stereo width. But in this case, this melody just feels like it's going to the left. Yeah, there's sometimes some elements the panning is okay, some elements the panning feels very, very strange. Didn't get to fix up the panning before I sent it on. That's understandable. It's something that I mentioned just like half an hour ago in the stream or something like that. Maybe an hour. A little bit of stereo width on your bassline would be nice as well. When it comes to stereo width on basslines, the plugin that I recommend is M Stereo Spread. And you set the tonality with these two sliders over here. First of all, of course, make sure that it doesn't go too much into the lower frequencies. And then you can set tonality here and here. Again, you guys don't actually hear the effect of this plugin because we're not actually listening to this track over here. We're just directly listening to the output of Discord, so I cannot actually show you what it would sound like on here. But a little bit of stereo width like this. Maybe you're going to set the spread to something like 20 to 10%. That should give you, shape-wise, a bassline that kind of looks like this. Like it's not exactly a line, but it's very close to it, right? It's like a very elongated egg shape. Or oval shape, probably. Because you want the top and the bottom to be the same. Here again you have a main piano melody and a sitar melody those are hard panned. If you want to have these two elements contrast together in terms of panning, pan them 10%, maybe 15%, something like that. Don't hard pan those kind of things. Because they're main elements. Even to be honest, I would say my first instinct would be don't pan them. Have them both in the middle. They're main elements. They're melodic things. They're the core idea of the track, so they shouldn't be off somewhere to the left. Right? It's the main thing. It should be in the center. Little bit of an empty part here. I think this is the outro. That does make sense then, that it's a little bit more empty. It does mean that your outro isn't really, that is again something to think about, your outro isn't really compatible in like a DJ set. It could be, like it's not too much of an issue, I think, but having the kick in your outro would definitely help any DJ beat match the track with the next track that is going to play. Okay. Next up we have learning projects over here with the creation 200 BPM G sharp preview. This I have to play in the browser because this is a Google Drive thing. Let's hope that it just loads and doesn't do anything annoying. I'm going to look at my bitrate for OBS once I play this, because sometimes it drops out completely. This chord feels a little bit off. Some very strange rhythms were being set up there. Kick and bass looks nice and clean. It is completely mono though, so I don't like that. I'm also not a fan of just having crashes and these strangely cut open hats. I think you forgot the most important part of a high-tech, which is the synths in the middle. Yeah, there's not a lot here yet. This is a very, very early preview. I would consider this a work in progress. There's still a lot of stuff to do there. So to be honest, I cannot give too much feedback. Hopefully the stuff that I did say is helpful. Yeah, but that means that we just have to move on. Jay Lana with Deep Reality. This is again a Google Drive thing, so I'll have to play that from here. And I'll have to check if that doesn't affect this here. Starts very, very loud with a very strong vocal. A very destroyed kick and bass. Transients are messed up here. The kick sub is looking very strange. You can see the hats on the stereo analyzer here with its random panning. This is why I'm not a fan of panning my hats either. It now sounds like the transient of the kick drum is panned slightly to the left, because that hat is actually panned slightly to the left. Vocal is very loud here again. I think it even distorted there for a second. I like a lot of the ideas that you have in the track. I like the, let's say, the production stage. I'm not a fan of the mix that you're doing. It feels like a lot of the sounds are like in front and very high. Meaning that the track doesn't have a lot of depth to it. Like we have this vocal choir in here, that could be a lot quieter, a lot more of a background sound. In this case the vocal also gets cut off by some other things, by these lead sounds over here, I guess.
So pure, so deep, so real, eternity.
Again, the panning on the snare here is not something that I would personally do. I feel like this main lead sound is a little bit too loud. I also feel like the kick and bass doesn't really... It is obviously like a very deep sound, but it doesn't really have the punch and the power. And I think part of that has to do with the fact that your sub bass of the kick looks so wonky. I don't know where that is coming from. Another thing I would recommend is obviously resampling your kick and bass, because the kick transient is a little bit all over the place. I think you're losing punch there as well. Maybe you can get away with LFO tool. I think, yeah, you can get away with proper LFO tool sidechaining, because the transients, or the bass doesn't really have a transient, I think. So you don't need to worry too much about bleeding from one transient into the next with this bass line. Even there, you could make the bass line a little bit shorter so that it has less release, or so that the release fades out in like over here, as opposed to you're probably holding the note up until this point and then the release happens. So the release stage of the sound is happening in the next bass sound. So what you probably want to do is make it so that it kind of releases over here and it goes to silence here, and then it plays the next thing. As I said, very cool idea. I really like what you did there with the musical idea. It just needs a lot better mix. If you say, I don't like any of that, I don't want to spend any time working on the mix, I do offer mixing services. A little bit of a shameless self-promotion, but then again, this is my live stream, so that is okay. At least I find it okay. But I could mix this for you if you want to, and then I can get you the things that I described were missing in the track. Because idea-wise and production-wise, this track is exactly where it needs to be. The ideas that you put in the track are really cool. The flow of the track is really cool. The structure of the track is really well done. All of that stuff is sounding really good. It's just the mixing part that is an issue. Also, the bass was not individually sampled. I think it's better for you, or at least it's quicker for you if you just LFO to it and make the notes a little bit shorter so that the release... So basically, whatever the release time is, make the notes that amount of it shorter, plus maybe a millisecond or two. So if you have a 15 millisecond release time, make the notes 17, 18 milliseconds shorter. That does require you to, if you're doing any multiband processing or filtering or that kind of stuff, if you have like a high pass filter on your bass that is doing something like this, which we talked about before in the stream, delete that stuff. Otherwise, if you do have that kind of stuff, you would probably need to resample. Because at that point, you need to make the notes so short that you're actually going to hear that the note is going to stop playing before it's supposed to. And that certain frequencies do not get extended towards like the actual end of the note. What's a good way to describe? There's not really a good way to describe that. Unless you know exactly what is going on with phasing and that kind of stuff. But in that case, to be honest, I would have expected you to have a little bit of a better kick drum. I think that may be the only thing that I cannot fix in the mix. The kick drum being so strange and wobbly. Either there's something really weird going on in that you're layering your bass on top of the kick drum there. Or you're using maybe the wrong kick. I don't know. To be honest, it's sometimes hard to look into a project like that and to really know what is going on. Again, if you want me to take a look at it on my website, projectorsound.com, you'll find details in regards to my mixing services. Oh, that's my Gumroad. That's not where I wanted to go. I have a website and a Gumroad that uses the same picture for the link. So I just look at the picture and I chose the wrong one. Either way, the PDF with my mixing services are over here. And yeah, if you're interested in that, of course, contact me and then we'll sort something out. Either way, we're going to move on to the next one, which is Zen Lion, who is here in the chat. I made the dissonant sounds by copying a machine in Bitwig Polygrid from a video. Added a couple of things and did some modulations differently than I played around and added the poem later. Okay, desiderata.mp3. It means, desiderata means desired in Italian. It is indeed very dissonant. I like that. I'm always a fan of experimental forms of music, to say it like that. And dissonant sound design is, of course, a part of that. Oh yeah, Jay Lena, the last thing that I wanted to say is use Syscope or an oscilloscope tied to the beat. Syscope is the one that works on Windows and that I always recommend. Use something like that to check the kick and bass whenever you're producing. Vocal could be a little bit louder. It is hard to understand what he's actually saying because you have such a strong effect on there. I think we used to have, I think now roughly a year ago, a person that also made music as the backing for something like a poem. And I think he even wrote the poems himself and did his own vocals on them and spoke them in himself. But he had a very similar issue than this track has, in that he is clearly trying to make, and you're as well, clearly trying to make a track that is kind of like backing for this poem thing, right? So the functionality is very different from, say, a psytrance track or any other instrumental track. Yet you wrote the instrumental part like an instrumental. There's not a lot of space for the vocal, and then the vocal is very quiet, and it has a very strong flanger effect on top of it. So all of those things combined mean that we cannot actually hear what the poem is. Like, I've tried to focus mentally on the vocal, trying to understand what he is saying in certain parts. And especially here when there's a lot of leads playing and stuff like that, it's just it's impossible. I cannot hear what he's saying. I do really like the concept of this kind of track. I like these kind of poem tracks. It often allows you to be a little bit more experimental with stuff like soundscape as opposed to normal leads and such. Like, you have some normal kind of leads in here, like some square leads and stuff like that. I would even go as far as just to completely remove those and just keep it to a soundscape, that low bass line. Maybe even remove the clap and the hat, stuff like that. And just have a space that is like the lowest frequencies here and then the vocal on top. Now the poem was last, I didn't plan to build it around the track. If you're doing this kind of poem style track, then that is probably what you should be doing. Also because it allows you to musically emphasize different parts of the poem. If a poem in its storytelling or whatever goes to a crescendo, you can have, for example, a pad that slightly opens up in filter cutoff and kind of backs that, right? I don't want to say too much stuff like that, because you may say like, oh, filter cutoff going up, I'm going to open up the filter cutoff all the way to 20,000 hertz on this pad. That is not what I mean, because you always want it to be backing. You always want it to be below. So something like, if you want to have, say, over 16 bars, you want to build up to crescendo, I would probably open up the filter cutoff from, say, 100 hertz on like a very Reese-based kind of pad kind of thing, and then just have that open up to maybe 1000 hertz. You always want space for the vocal in these kind of tracks, because the vocal is then, it is the main thing, right? It's the poem that is important. That is what is telling the message of the track. So that message needs to come through. And that is something that can only really happen if you build the track around the vocal. Because then you can have, I don't know, certain elements that are in rhythm with the vocal, whatever the vocal is saying, for example. Or you can, as I said before, you can adapt the idea of the track to give any different energies to different parts of the poem. If a poem, as I said, is building up and it's going to a moment where it needs to be bigger, you can do that with the music as well, whilst maintaining the music in the back of the vocal. I am quickly going to do another break. I'll put on some other music as well. I have to take a break because I am out of drinks, as you can see. So let's see. I guess I can put on this track. I haven't played this one in a while. That was strange. It took a long while to load. It is a long track, but having it load for so long is not something that happens often. Anyway, I'm going to take a quick break, and Ableton crashed. Okay. Sometimes that does happen. Sometimes Max or the signalizer is a little bit unstable. So these are things that can happen. Hopefully it doesn't happen again. Again, I have to turn this off. This is loaded. This needs to be looped. And then... yeah, now it just works. See, it is not fully stable. So this can happen with Signalizer. Either way, I'm taking a quick break and then I'll be back and we'll listen to some more music. Nice track, thank you. Oh. I tried to stop it, but pressed spacebar while the wrong program was in focus. Anyway, let's hope that nice stuff doesn't crash now. We have currently 1, 2, 3 more tracks to listen to. Let's hope that there's a few more. Maybe some more low mid energy on some of those last leads. Yeah, the track is still not finished. You can still hear that it's in production. The way that you can determine if my track is in production or not, or if it's like the final idea for a track, is if I play the delay tail over here of the outro, there's still stuff in here that doesn't need to be there. So you can hear like a very distorted version of the vocal still in here, right? Like in here you can hear it at best. Hear that rhythm that is still there? That means that there's a vocal somewhere here, I think. Yeah, that's what I'm going to do is I'm probably going to cut that delay off right here. And then you wouldn't hear it, of course, over here. That means that I'm still working on the production side of things. And that means that still stuff may change. And of course, this is also something that I could potentially fix in the mix as well. So that is maybe something that I'll address Well, I'm still working on it. It's not a finished track yet. It's not a finished idea, to say it like that. Anyway, let's move on to your music again. We have Snooze 808 over here, also known as Evalo. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. I'm almost sure that I am. But this is Out of Clay. Sounds interesting. Strong start here. I feel like the bass line is too low. Yeah, the bass line is playing at like 20 Hz or something like that. It feels. Right? Can I freeze this in such a way that I can see? I think this one here, yeah. Yeah, so the bass line is playing an octave too low here. The way that you can tell is this is a perfect fifth, the difference between these two peaks, and this is the bass line playing here. And this is an octave, right? It goes from F to E. The analyzer is not exact, which we talked about before during this stream, but this then is an E, and this is probably also an E, meaning that this is an octave, and usually you want your lowest fundamental to be around this area over here. You don't want it to be like 20 Hertz, in this case 21 Hertz. That is lower than any system can reproduce. So you need to take your bass line and turn it up by an octave. You can also hear it in the like rumbling quality that the bass has. You can essentially hear every single oscillation of this bass line, which is a good indication that your bass line is too low. The reason why that is a problem is now it doesn't really have a strong sub bass that is going to be played by any system, because there's no system that is going to play like 20 Hertz. Most systems cut off at maybe 30 Hertz, 35. Overall, I would also say that the track is a little bit muddy, a little bit messy. The vocal doesn't really come through. It could be a little bit louder and a little bit drier in terms of reverb. I do like the overall vibe and the overall sound design. It sounds fairly industrial, which I like. Sorry. I think at this point the vocal should probably stop, because otherwise it plays for too long and it becomes boring. What I would probably do personally is just have the vocal in the break there, because there it really came through. And then you can go back into the more industrial part over here, which is a nice contrast, as opposed to actually having that in part of the drop. Maybe a little bit of an acid line at this point would be nice. The problem is going to be if you remove that vocal like I suggested before from the drop, is that all 3 of your drops are going to sound the same. So you would need something that differentiates the drops from each other. And in that case, something like an acid line could help here. Maybe in the second drop then, you would need to have like a special element to make that one stand out. I do really like the distorted kick drum that you have. It's very punchy, very powerful. It does work really well with the more industrial vibe that you seem to be going for. Should I take one of the synths and replace it with an acid? I don't think so, no. I don't think it would become too overcrowded. Because now, especially that if you take my advice and put it in the second drop, you would remove the vocal and use that space that you were using for the vocal for the acid line. So that would be okay, right? Like you remove an element and then you have the space to put back another element. And another thing is that right now the synths that are playing the whole time. So you get used to those synths kind of being there the whole time, especially because I think you also had them playing in the breakdown, and you can make use of that fact that psychologically speaking we get like bored of the sounds that continue to play for a very long time, right? That is also the reason why I said like that vocal is becoming fairly boring. You can make use of the fact that some of the sounds are boring in that if they become boring and there's another sound that comes in there, what we tend to do when we're listening is we tend to focus on the new stuff. So you can get away with mix-wise giving something a little bit less space than it may need in the mix, purely because everything else has been playing for so long. While we're listening to the track and while we're decoding what is going on in the track, like we tend to make more space in the elements, right? Because at the end of the day, one of the things that you have to understand about music is that it is just one file. It's just one signal. It's just the speakers going back and forth. All of the individual sounds that we hear aren't actually there in the signal. It's just one signal, right? It is in our head, in our brain, that we decode that into, oh, this is the kick drum, this is the bass line, this is the lead, this is the hat, this is the this and that and whatever it is. And that means that you have a little bit of flexibility in the way that it's decoded. So you can actually make use of the fact that some of those elements you're playing throughout the whole track, and that they automatically start to become more background elements, especially if you put something like not so much on top of it, but like right next to it. I don't want to say on top of it because that would imply that you would need to mix that acid line then louder than the synths. I would just put the acid line and all of the other synths that you're playing throughout the whole time at the same level, and then that way, like it would automatically draw our attention more to the acid line than the other synths once that acid line starts to play. Hopefully that makes sense. Next up we have another track of Mocha. This time hopefully no remix. Let's have a listen here. This is Asteroids by Mocha. Let's see. And then we have one more track after this one. Not really a fan of the snare coming in fully. I would probably filter that in. Maybe even have the clap come in volume-wise as well. I like the little glitching up that is happening here. Kick and bass can be a bit louder. Give them maybe 4 dB, both of them. Right now it feels like the kick and bass is a little bit too much in the background, I would say. Appreciate the feedback, you're welcome. Hopefully it's helpful. One of the things that I often see with a lot of people is that they have a kick drum that is like really sharp. And in this case you can see it almost gets to 20k, this kick drum. What I personally like to do with kicks that are this sharp is these transients, they almost become like piercing because they are like very loud elements, especially if they were mixed well. As I said, this kick and bass probably needs like 4 dB to really be at the level where they should be mix-wise. At that point, this becomes almost like a too sharp part of the kick drum. So what I personally do with all of my kick drums is I low pass my kick at around 10k. Sometimes it's like 8k, sometimes it's maybe 12k, depending on how sharp of a tonality I go through. But the control of the high frequencies of your kick drum is fairly important to make sure that you don't get too sharp of a transient. Here again, in the same way, these snares and the clap, I would try to find a way to have that smoothly come in. Right now, the idea, what it's telling me is that energy-wise, you're suddenly going up like that, right? When the snare starts to play and the clap also starts to play. Instead, what I would try to go for, since you have that in the melody, is try to go for energy that kind of goes up like this. You can filter in the snares and then volume up, for example, the claps. To make sure that both of them slowly fade in. Overall, I really like this vibe. I really like this groove. I like the little repeating synth that repeats every bar. I like how many different things you're doing to it. I like the little glitchy thing. I like that it's opening up. I like that it's changing tonality. It keeps it interesting. It is very hard to have a repeating sound like that, especially like every bar, and keeping that interesting over time for like 5 minutes. So it's nice to see how you're doing that. Good stuff. I like that. Sounded cool. It was still playing something, like a little vinyl noise thing there. I was like, am I suddenly getting issues with my audio thing? with my audio driver or something like that. Because I do have it where if I leave my phone really close to my audio interface, you get the like crackles and stuff like that almost sounds like dial-up in certain cases, right? You get like hums and zooms and stuff like that. So I thought maybe I had left my phone around, but I couldn't see it because my phone is in the other room. So that wouldn't be the case. But there's little vinyl crackles there towards the end of the track, which was kind of funny. Anyway, this is currently the last track that we have in the queue by One Hit Onsia. I think that's how you pronounce it. This is Hoffman over here. If you guys want to submit more music, of course you can do so. If not, at the end of this track, I'll just finish the stream and we'll have more tracks to listen to next week. It's gonna take a little bit of time to load. Can I see how long this track is? I don't think I can, but from what I remember, this is a pretty long track.
Substances known to science.
Either way, this is, as I said, Hoffman by One Hit Onsia.
It's a hazardous mental journey into a universe of hallucination, intense emotion, and some believe mystical revelation.
Vocal is mixed well. I like it. Kick and bass is clean. I like that as well. Although the bassline could have a bit more of a stronger click in the transient. I think what might be happening with the transient of your kick drum, with the transient of your bass, if I go into my bass over here, is that you set up your bass something like this, where the phase is set exactly on the click of the saw wave. What you often want to do is set it a little bit before that, so that you have this attack stage kind of coming in, and then the click happens so that you get a full click that can function as your actual transient for your bassline. I may have had that paused for some reason, I guess. Sound design is super cool. I like it a lot. One of the things that I don't really like is that the snare feels like it always comes back in the exact same way, since everything is very chaotic and very random. What I would probably do either at this point just remove this snare from this section and just have it in fewer sections, so it isn't always playing. I guess that's what you're doing now, right? Yeah. The other thing that I was going to say is maybe pitch up and down the snare from time to time.
Like kind of an explosion.
Cool stuff. There was a slight issue there for some reason. I think what happened there is that you have an automation that snaps right on the kick transient. If it's an automation that turns something on or off, make sure that it's turning off right before the kick. Whatever effect is happening on the kick drum then turns on right before the kick plays, as opposed to at the transient that the kick plays. And if it's a continuous automation like a filter slope, don't snap down on the kick transient, but fade down slightly before it. Because if filters snap from one position to the other, which is what you're doing if you have like 2 points at the same time value, basically. Right, if one is very high and the other is very low, the filter from one moment goes from here to like here, something like that. That generates a lot of lower frequencies. nice way of going into the break, I would remove the crash. Because you could see when it was playing, it was basically, the track was already looking like this, frequency-wise. And then suddenly there was this crash above it that just kind of fills in a pocket. Either fade in the high frequencies to the crash like that, or don't have the crash so that the track kind of just becomes smaller in frequency spectrum and then throughout the break opens up again. Which I think is a more interesting effect.
Then, in the early 1960s, LSD leaked out of the laboratory. With bizarre and unforeseen consequences, the drug was consumed by a generation of young people seeking spiritual transcendence and an escape from the conventional world.
I would probably open up the plugs a little bit less or a little bit later. Like over here, have them open up in the drop itself. That way the vocal has a bit more space, because towards the end I felt like the last few words were a little bit unintelligible of what the vocal was saying. I do like this bass line though. Sounds very strong. Also looks very clean. Here again, you could see it even in the waveform. There's that low frequency thing that I think that's an automation issue there. Again, if you have the plugin, M Stereo Spread, take this plugin, make sure that you high pass maybe at between 150 and 300 Hertz somewhere. Add that to your bassline and then get the right tonality that you want with the amount of bands and the focus, and then set the amount of stereo spreading that you want with the spread amount over here, or the width. In this case, they would do the same thing, because I believe your bassline is mono before going into a plugin like this. Usually, there's for one, I think that this plugin is a little bit of magic, because it always improves the tonality of my bassline. Secondly, I also think that just having a bit of stereo width makes the bassline a lot more interesting. So, not just for the tonality part of it, because I think this does like with the bands, it does a lot of filtering, so it would change the tonality. Obviously, it would introduce a lot of phase shift and that kind of stuff. But we're only doing that in frequencies where it doesn't really matter in regards to bleeding into transients and stuff like that, the stuff that I often talk about, the cleanliness of the bassline essentially. But also I just think that a little bit of stereo width makes it so that the bassline is a little bit more cohesive with the leads and stuff like that. Because all of the leads and that kind of stuff had a nice stereo width to it. But then the kick and bass feels very, very in the center. And of course the kick needs to be in the center, because that is the main thing that we dance to. So for the kick drum, I always recommend full mono compatibility. But for the bassline, there's enough higher frequencies that you can glue those higher frequencies. I guess not even higher frequencies. Mainly the mid-range, like 300 hertz and up to maybe say 1000 hertz. But I never low pass this effect, by the way, because you want those bands that you're setting to be as spread out as possible. So I don't want this effect to be limited in the high frequencies, right? So you can even set this higher if you want to, but I just leave it at its default 15K that it opens up. And then I set this to something like 200, as I said, between like 150 at its lowest to 300 hertz at its highest, so that it doesn't influence any of the lower frequencies. And then between these two frequencies, we're going to get 21 bands, or whatever amount of bands that you set here. So it's going to split that up and do a lot of phase shifting in that area. And I think that tonal change never seems to, for me at least, never seems to be a bad thing. And then the stereo width, as I said, is more for the cohesion with stuff like the leads and all of the other like sound design material in your track. So a plugin like this, highly would recommend any sidetrance artist uses this or gets this plugin and uses it on their bassline. Okay, we have 2 more tracks. How long have I been live for? It does say that YouTube is not receiving enough video to maintain smooth streaming. As such, your viewers will experience buffering. I think that means that we may have had another disconnect recently. If that is the case and I've just been rambling to myself for the last few minutes, then let me know, I can do that again. Or I can say what I said again. Of course, if you have any questions, then you could also do that. But for now, I'm going to move on to the next track, which is Matt J over here with Dubstep Sketch 1 Work in Progress 5.wave. Let's have a listen. Here's the opening track for my album. It's called Routine. Oh, sorry. Let's have a listen to Routine. That was a very short disconnect, like 3 seconds. Okay, hopefully nothing important was missed. 2 more months, hopefully. Then I have everything sorted, everything fixed, and I'm in a new apartment. Old school dubstep is very, very nice. I like it. At least I think this is going to be more of an old school vibe, just listening to the sound design of it. Some very interesting sound design, I really like that. Sounds complex. I like that question and answer with the stereo width that you're doing here between the 2 pluck sounds. Do you hear how one pluck is more mono and one pluck is more towards the sides here? I don't know if there's an easy way to do this. I don't know how you're sidechaining, but I sometimes feel like the sidechaining is engaging too late. I guess that is, from what I can hear up until this point, my main issue with the mix is sometimes the transient of the kick drum gets smothered out with the bass a little bit, and I don't really know about any form of sidechaining that allows you to engage the sidechaining slightly before the kick drum plays. Because essentially what you would want is, say that you just have a 4 on the floor, right? If we have a 4 on the floor kick drum and we're sidechaining, this is the situation now that you have, right? The sidechain gets engaged when the kick is playing and then it just disengages over the beat, basically, on a standard 4 on the floor. What we usually do on 4 on the floor sidechaining though is we do something like this. So the sidechain kind of engages before the kick drum, right? Because this loops around. And then the kick drum plays from this point. So the bass line is already silent. It already gives space for the kick drum to play. Then the kick drum plays and then the bass line comes back up. Or whatever you're sidechaining. In this case it feels like it crosses right up until that kick transient, and then it kind of it's not really covering it up, because it's not, if you are sidechain, it's not even playing exactly at the same time, right? Because the kick plays and then that should duck the bass. But ideally what you would want is a system where it ducks the bass slightly before the kick plays. I don't know if there's a good way to do that, because you don't have any like traditional, you don't have like the easy way of doing it in the 4 on the floor, where we just use the fact that this shape just loops over and over again, and that there's always a kick just playing right here. This track did that thing where you have a separate MIDI track splitting out the square wave that was triggering the sidechain. Maybe not the best idea. Are you in Ableton? Because then it's a very good idea. If you're in Ableton, what you can do is you can go in here where you have your track milliseconds, and you can add negative delay to your sidechain track. So you can just say, oh, I want the sidechain to engage, I don't know, 10 seconds or 10 milliseconds before the kick drum, or 30 seconds before the 30 milliseconds before the kick drum. That is actually a solution. You can move forward your sidechain track. Yeah, that would work. Even your sidechain trigger, if you don't have something like this, you could just take the MIDI of the sidechain and just move that forward slightly. Yeah, then this could be an option. It is having the separate trigger, of course, allows you to do that, because it allows you to basically desync the trigger from the actual kick that is playing. Another way that you could technically do that is in the compressor that is doing the sidechaining. If you're doing it via a compressor, is using look ahead. Right? If you use 10 milliseconds of look ahead, that should also engage the sidechain before the kick drum plays, if you were to sidechain actually from the kick drum. So there are actually options of doing that. The thing that I would like it to do. To be honest, that is the only thing that I heard. Overall, I think I've said this before, but your mixes are very clean, very deep sounding. So overall sounds very, very nice. Or a ghost kick track where you move the kick back a few milliseconds. Yeah, he is triggering from a separate trigger. We call that a trigger because its only goal in the project is not to be audible, but to trigger any sidechains that happen. Right? It's the thing that I have as well in my standard template. I never use it because I never sidechain. That's true. I never sidechain anything anymore. Unless I'm doing creative sidechaining, in which case I use LFO tool. But if I go into my standard template, you'll still see a remnant of this. In that I also have a sidechain trigger that in this case is in MIDI. And all this does for me is it generates a short pulse. In this case, the way that it works is that it basically generates an LFO tool like pulse. And this also has, or how should I say, like if I sidechain anything to this track over here, it will basically look like this. I think I can set it up because I should have sidechain receiver somewhere as well. Yeah, sidechain receiver. Let's say that I set this up over here. I should be able to show this. I go threshold all the way down here. Yeah, you can see now my sidechain is engaging. And that is just purely based on the trigger that I'm generating over here. So basically what you can see is this at some point gets inverted. The way that this works is that I generate this signal. I then flip that signal upside down. And I then generate an operator sound with the same amplitude envelope as what we set over here. Meaning that I can also change how the envelope looks. If I make this a lot longer, you'll be able to see I get like a different trigger over here as well. You can see it sidechains longer, right? So the way that this works is it's basically combining the idea of LFO tool together with like normal sidechain compression. Is essentially the idea that I had over here. Bitwig has time delay insert. I don't know if that works because you need negative delay. A lot of inserts, like if I add a delay over here, like a normal delay, it is only positive delay, so it can only make stuff happen later in time. We want it to happen slightly before the kick drum plays. We want the kick drum to play over here, right, and the tail of the kick drum is going that way. I'm pointing for myself in the same way that the DAW is working. My camera just overheated. Nice. I'll turn on my AC again. Yeah, my camera is too warm. Have to do a few minutes without camera, I suppose. That thing cool off. It is so warm here in Italy nowadays that my room gets so warm that my camera just heats up too much. It has negative delay in milliseconds or samples. Yeah, then you can use it. Okay, this is interesting. I didn't know that. Because, yeah, I guess that could be implemented in ways, but... Of course, you can always implement those things in the DAW itself, but any like external process, like say that if it was a plugin... no, even plugins could do that, because it would just hoard... Or it would just take that from the plugin delay compensation. I think. I don't know. Not a delay plugin. I mean, a delay plugin is the same as like sample delay. But it just has a feedback path in it. And it has some more options. It usually has filtering. It usually has like the ping pong mode and stuff like that, right? But technically speaking, the only difference between this and a sample delay is that you cannot put in actual sample values in here. In Ableton, we have something for that called align delay. This stuff over here, right? Which has like individual milliseconds, and I think you can also set, yeah, samples and even distance in meters, or if you need to align microphones with each other. But the way that you say it in Bitwig, yeah, that would work for the sidechaining as well. Anyway, let's listen to the last track. I think after this I'll close the queue since my camera is giving up on me. I came back from my second break and I was like, I have had the AC running for the whole stream. I think I can turn it off and get away with not having the AC running. But apparently that was enough for my camera to just overheat here. Anyway, let me actually play this from here. This is going to be Burdenless. Evalo. I'm sorry, Snooze 808 with Burdenless. Another strong techno vibe here. I have to check if this is again. It is looking a bit wonky in that the bass note plays here, it stops, and then there's another small segment of bass playing here, and then the next note triggers. Here it doesn't look like it's going too low. It does look a little bit like that. Let's see if I can catch just the bass part. I think you may again have the same issue of the bass line being an octave too low. I cannot verify it in the same way that we verified it in the last track. Honestly, what I would probably do with this track is just extend the bass notes a bit longer so that you're filling up this space a bit more here. Because you have a very strong low end kick here, which doesn't even go that low. I cannot verify if what I was said about the octave of the bass line is actually true or not. This looks like an oscillation which may be slightly too low. Like it's lower than the kick over here, but then again the kick isn't too low. Like the kick drum is 50 Hertz, so maybe this is 30 Hertz oscillation, I don't know. It's harder for me to verify, at least in this track. There's more stuff going on, so that makes it harder.
After the sun has set, my demons are released, I can't hold them back no more. All my burdens now are free, all the burdens I had to bear. In this freedom I will soar and devour every demon. Even though my soul was torn, I was not deprived of reason. And despite of all the scorn, I shall flourish in each and every season.
I like the instrumentation of this one a lot though. It sounds very, very cool. I think here though the vocals don't have enough space. I would probably personally remove the vocals from this part here. Especially with this massive reverb. You could have them in here in like a fill like that. A little bit of a fill would be nice where this idea suddenly changes. Just maybe one beat where the bass line doesn't play. Keep in mind that fills are indications of changes in the track, right? Like if the kick and bass stops for a bar or a beat, then that tells the people listening like, oh, something is about to happen. Cool stuff. I like it. Yeah, I don't think I have much more to say in regards of to the track, but also in general. I am going to end it here. My camera already died, so it's a good time. I hope you guys enjoyed the stream. I hope you guys found the feedback helpful. And I don't know if I'm going to be doing streams in between the feedback streams in the next few weeks, since as I said, I'm going away for like 3 weeks. I have a lot of work that I have to do in advance. I've already started recording some videos in advance. I also have another project that I want to maybe do for September that would require a lot of work. So I'm going to be very busy, which means that probably the only streams that we're going to get for the next few weeks up until my vacation is just the feedback streams, and that's it. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. I would wave goodbye. I can still wave goodbye to the camera, but it's off, so it doesn't really matter. So I hope you enjoyed, and I hope to see you in the next one, which will be next Sunday. Bye bye.